Would a single score nudge you to change your behavior? In the personalized health and nutrition industry, there are plenty of scores. There are scores to help you match your personal preferences and profile to products, to recipes, to measure your biological age, to measure your metabolic health. And so these scores are really indicated as behavior change technique, so that you have some kind of a gauge on where you are, whether the score is going up or the score is coming down, and therefore you can act accordingly. Now, these scores are, plentiful in the industry, and it just seems like every company is developing their own, which in essence already tells you that there could be a potential problem if each one is developing their own, because there is no real standardization of the data that goes into developing these kind of scores. And so the benefits of having a score, of course, is people love simplicity. Yeah. People like a single number. They go, yeah, it's up, yeah, it's down in comparison to yesterday or the day before, it's up or down. And so people can relate to a single number. Now, it gets complicated because people are complex, behavior is complex. So in essence, a score needs to be connected to some kind of an incentive or reward or an outcome, so that people can actually then, change their behavior accordingly to mitigate the effects, or to, preempt what's going to happen, and therefore they are going to change their behavior. The negative side of this is, of course, there is not that much research into looking at what should go into a score, and what the behavioral outcome is of having a score as well. So we've seen this a lot with kind of scoring of food products, traffic light systems, these kind of things, which also in a way is a kind of a score. In that it does not have that much impact on behavior when it comes to, food choices or lifestyle choices. And so it is really important to kind of take a step back and say, do we need to, have another score, or is this score really relevant to me? And so what people can do essentially is, and I've also heard this happen, is if people can follow the score, and if they know that, eating that thing maybe that they shouldn't be eating will have an impact on them, well, they'll remove the sensor, or they just won't log that food, or, something like that. So in order not to impact the score. And so I think people, once they kind of know how the score works for them, once they figured out how it impacts the recommendations that are provided to them, they will then change their behavior accordingly, and then start, playing the system, so to speak. But, this is not everybody, of course, but I think the important thing to be mindful of is really to say, if so many companies have their own score, we need to really question the impact that it will have. I mean, essentially, we do want everybody to have better health outcomes, right? But very few companies actually validate their score. So while they're very proud of the algorithm, and it's patented or whatever the case might be, very few have actually done the research and said, our score really leads to a reduction in this, it leads to this kind of change in behavior, and this is what we really should be looking out for. So if you're really looking at using a score or developing a score, is thinking about who developed the score, because there are already, biases in that based on what data is pulled to create that score. Who is weighting, that score, because that again can bring in bias as well. Also, who approved the score? Are there bodies, recognized government bodies, health organization bodies that actually approve the score, so that you can trust that that score is recognizable, it's transferable, it's reproducible, and that therefore it's something to really pay attention to. The other thing is also like how often is the score updated, because science changes, and therefore it's always important to reflect on how that score was developed and is it still relevant. Are there unintended consequences? So was the scoring viewed or critically analyzed by some experts in the field who can maybe bring out those unintended consequences, or maybe also identify which data was excluded from developing that score as well. So there are quite a few things that go into thinking about developing a score, or even being guided by a score as well, which I think are really important. And so moving forward, I do think that there will be more scores in the next few months and years to come, but we need some kind of a critical eye, critical ear to question the recommendations that are being provided by the app or by the platform, to really step back and think, is this relevant to me? Is this advice relevant to me? Is the guidance given relevant to me? And if something doesn't look right, if it doesn't sound right, check with the experts, check with healthcare professionals, and seeing if that is really something to go by. So scores are prolific in the industry. I think there will be some some regulation about in the future about how scores are developed, or kind of standardized data that can be used to develop some of these scores. But as a behavior change modification tool, we are really still early. And as I said, it needs to demonstrate outcome and change behavior. So the science and the research needs to be done for that. Thank you.